Okay, hello guys. So I'm just going to quickly run through with you how to do this painting. You can use normal paints to do this work, but I'm going to be showing you how you can actually use some household condiments if you don't have any paints at home. And also it might just be quite fun to try something a little bit different. So what I'm going to be showing you today is a painting with some coffee, some turmeric and some paprika. I've already got them laid out in little bowls here. I've also been doing on this page just a little bit of a tester of some different materials. You don't have to use these three. Maybe have a little think about what you have in your house. If you're also using something like coffee, it might be worth considering making a couple of different levels of strength. If all you have is coffee, you could try and do this whole painting in coffee, that's absolutely fine. So the first thing I'm going to do, to start off, I've done a small little square of coffee. You can think about the size you want to work. This is an A4 piece of paper. I'm only doing a relatively small painting, that's all I kind of need from you guys as well. You can do it bigger if you want to. Sometimes it's actually easier to do a slightly larger size than it is to do a smaller one. And I'm going to attach this picture onto the Teams. It's a close-up of an eye from a Byzantine piece of work. There we go. And I'm going to start off today just sketching out the details. I'm going to go... In fact, what I'm probably going to do, I'm going to go relatively big and just do the eye today. If you want to do a little bit larger and do some of the details around the outside, you're perfectly welcome to as well. I just want us to get a little bit more confident with this eye work. I've got a little bit of the nose in the corner there, a little dark area under the eye. So I'm just sketching it out really lightly first, the eyelid and the pupil, like that. Really light sketch out, shouldn't take too long. I'm then going to use my brushes. You probably will need brushes for this. If you don't have brushes, I can potentially share with you a couple of ideas. You can use a small rolled up cotton bud, but it doesn't quite work the same, or a very small piece of sponge. But as I said, if you don't have brushes and you want to do this in something like coloured pencil, that's fine as well. We'll see how we go. Okay, so first thing I'm going to start doing, I'm actually going to get out a little bit of dry coffee here as well. Ready to use it in case I want a slightly darker colour. A little bit there. There we go. So first thing I'm going to do is just start sketching out the eye shape. I'm going to do it with a relatively small brush. Do I have a smaller one? I've got a smaller one actually. Relatively small brush. And I'm just going to start sketching out that line from the top of the eye. And you can see I need to use quite a lot of coffee. We have to play around with our amounts. And I'm going to sketch out the kind of outside line of the eyelids. Get a little bit of darker coffee here. A little bit of a darker tone by mixing up some more dried coffee. There we go. A little bit of dry coffee, we can get quite a dark, thick line on there and on there. Okay, I'm going to sketch out my outline. Oh, a bit too much. Going to sketch out my outline of my nose, just there, and I'm going to start with the bottom of the eye and that little crease underneath. Don't forget that little darker crease underneath the eye. I'm going to fill that in a little larger later on. The outside of the pupil and the inside of the pupil. Now later on, if you want to add some more details and go back into this with, as I said, if you've got a little bit of paint and you want to go in a little bit darker, or you want to use some coloured pencils to enhance the dark and light areas, that's absolutely fine. But I'd love you to have a little go with some coffee. So that's my basic outline to start with. I'm going to move on to a slightly larger brush and start filling in some of the darker shadowy areas that you can see in this picture. There you go. I see I might put it on this side so you can see it a little bit better. So first of all, underneath the eyelid is relatively dark. So I'm going to take quite a large section of coffee and paint it in there. I'm going to need to build up some layers with this. And I'm going to do that underneath the eye. I'm doing this with a slightly more watered down coffee. Slightly more watered down than what I've just used for my outlines. The side of the nose is relatively dark. Just there. You can see there are white lines in this piece of work. If you have a white pen, a white pencil or some white paint at home and want to add some of those highlights, you absolutely can. I'm also going to do that bridge above the nose, gets a little bit darker just there. I'm just going to do the edge just here of the head. So I'm just picking out some of my darker tones. There you go. Now, while I'm letting that dry, so I can do another layer, I'm just going to build up a little bit thicker on the eyebrow as well. Get that nice and thick in there. And I'm going to go over my darker tones in a little bit. There we go. Now, while I'm letting that dry, and I might pause it and go take a hairdryer to it, we can also start thinking about using some of our other colours. So there's a little bit of reddish colour around the outside of the eyebrow. I'm going to try it with my turmeric. No, not my turmeric, my paprika. Try a little bit of that mixed in. And I'm going to get some of my reddish tones in there. Not too much, it's going to be subtle. I'm going to get a little bit of it around the outside of the eye. And I'm going to get a little bit in the cheek here. I think that's pretty much, there's a little bit of a red line just down the side there. I'm going to wait for that to dry. I can also try it with my yellow. I'm here as well, some of my turmeric, watery yellow, and I'm going to try that. Just some of it up the top. Around here it's quite yellowy. I'm going to put some into the eye as well. Just a couple of dots of it in the eye to try and get that a little bit yellowy to start with. I'm going to mix it a tiny bit around this bottom edge. And probably mix a little bit of it with my colours at the bottom here so I get some more tonal range. Right, I'm going to pause and dry that off so I can show you the next layer. You're going to want to give this a minute to dry. Okay, so I've just dried off that first layer. You can see it goes a lot lighter once it's dry. So I'm now going to build up a second layer. And as I said before, if you're happy with this and then want to work in with coloured pencils, that is absolutely fine. Or if you want to start using some paint, I don't mind. I just love people to have a try of a little bit of alternative paint. So I'm just going to go back over some of my darker outlines, again with my thickest level of coffee. This is quite a lot of coffee mixed in with just the tiniest bit of water, getting those granules and really mixing them together to get the thickest paint that you can. And I'm working back over each of my lines. And with the coffee, you probably have to do this a couple of times. If you want to mix a little bit of black paint into it or think about alternatives to black, that'd be quite interesting, isn't it? I don't know what you could use for alternatives to black paint. If you've got anything in your kitchen colours, I'd be very interested to hear some suggestions. There we go, going back over my outlines. My nice thick, dark brown colours. Oh, lost a little bit of coffee there. Take that off. There we go, I'm just filling the inside of that eyebrow because that eyebrow is relatively dark as well. Okay, so I've just built it up a little bit more off camera. I know that just jumped a little bit. What I've tried to do, what I've actually done just now is just sat a small grain of coffee in my pupil to try and get it a little bit darker, and that is bleeding out a little bit there, but I don't mind that too much actually. Don't mind how much that's spreading too much. Oh, so right here. There we go, liking the texture that's happening there. Okay, and as I said, mostly it's just building up layers. So I've put just the same kind of places I've put it on previously. I've just done a build up a layer. And if you want those really dark tones, paint your very thin line and then just drip some of your wetter paint into it and let it sit. Quite puddly. It means you've got to let it dry for quite a while. If you do that, you will get some thicker lines and darker colours. You just have to let them dry before you blend them with other tones. I'm going to drip that into there. Just going to extend that out a little bit. And that'll be my next layer. I'm going to dry that off. I could build up one more layer. I'm pretty happy with how that's going. As I said, if you have a white pen, I'm probably going to finish that off later on with a white pen and build it up a little bit more, and I'm probably going to get a second layer. That is a very brief example of how you can use, if you don't have paints at home and you want to use coffee, potentially some things like turmeric, potentially turmeric being that one there, potentially things like coffee, then you could have a little go. I would like a high quality copy of this work. Obviously, if you're doing it in coffee, it's a lot looser. It just is going to be. That's absolutely fine. About this size is absolutely fine. If you want to develop it a little bit more, if you don't have paints and you've got coloured pencils or watercolours, you're absolutely fine to use those as well. I will post this picture on Teams. I'd like a copy of this picture, please.